Hello and welcome to this edition of Beyond the Politics, our regular examination of the events happening right here in the Quinte region and the people who work so hard behind the scenes to make it all happen. I'm your host, Paul Martin. Joining me today from the City of Belleville Police Department are Police Chief Mike Callaghan and Deputy Chief Chris Berry. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having us, Paul.
So let's talk about the issue that's been on everyone's mind. It's been a growing problem in the area, and specifically, there's been a lot of attention drawn to it over the past 2 or 3 weeks, and that's the overdose crisis that's been happening in the area. And normally we use the word opioid, but it's not just even limited to that. There have been 2 or 3 issues that have come up lately. Let's start with you, Mike. When has this really started to spike? And then we had actually 2 things, a corrupted group or a dose batch of fentanyl, and then GHB being laced with some other drugs as well. So it's not even just one problem.
Well, you're right, Paul. And when we start to see those cocktails, if you will, that are lethal, we know that there's individuals in our community who are suffering from mental health and addictions and just cannot break the habit of or the cycle of using drugs. And when we see different types of drugs being mixed into opioids, whether it's fentanyl or whether it's cocaine that are laced with other drugs, it's critically important to get that message out that people are dying in our community as a result of it. And we have seized some drugs that we've sent away to Health Canada for testing, but that takes about 30 days at a minimum to get back. And we have intelligence information from our drug team and our intelligence section that they have been told that these drugs are laced with GHB, which is really uncommon. But the challenge in that, Paul, is that when people have the fentanyl as the base, if you will, and then they've got GHB added to it, the naloxone kits that we have and the paramedics and the fire department have are somewhat effective on the fentanyl, but not effective on the GHB. Mm-hmm. So that is a real recipe for disaster.
Now, Chris, that's what it is. Also, what people might be shocked to know if they haven't been following along is the numbers of people we're talking about, the number of overdoses, the number of cases, which in one case was 10 in a 2-hour period, and on one Friday was like 40 cases that went to the hospital that day. So we're not even talking about something that's individually dangerous. We're talking about something that literally is overwhelming the ability of both police and medical officials to handle.
Yes, and compromising our ability to help other people that maybe not be in the situation that people that are consuming illicit drugs, people that are having other medical issues, that have other kinds of emergencies. When our resources are all being tied up, that means they're not available for some of those other types of calls, and that's very dangerous.
How much has this been increasing? Because it's not new. I remember talking to other officials within the city, fire chiefs, of course, joint responses to a lot of events. But I've been shocked for a while now at how many overdose calls we get in general. So this is a rapid uptick that's lately connected with these specific lethal combinations of drugs. But how long has this been on the incline, and how dangerous a problem is this really? Like, is it, some people might say, oh, it's gone up now, but if we get these drugs off the street and we have a quick campaign, maybe it goes back down. But even at the levels it was at before, it was both unsustainable and very unsafe.
When you look at our numbers of overdoses, we'll say over a 7-day period, mm-hmm. and we're looking at 5 overdoses is a pretty significant number. Mm-hmm. And then you go in a 1-week period and have 90, Paul.
Yeah.
90 overdoses in 1 week. And that during that 1 week, we actually lost somebody on a Friday morning. They succumbed to those drugs that we were just not able to provide them with the medical attention. They were there, but they just couldn't revive the person. So, when we look at it from the perspective of 1 is too many, we need to ensure that we're educating, we're ensuring that we put stuff in place for those who are using street drugs, and we have to lobby our provincial governments to ensure that we have the mental health supports and the addiction supports for these individuals.
So what went into the thinking behind the press conference? Because, and we were talking about this off camera before, it's a relatively recent occurrence for police departments to be this proactive to say you may be engaging in an activity that might not be legal, but there's a greater concern here, which is the sanctity of life and making sure that people don't die unnecessarily. So what kind of conversation goes into having this kind of press conference, and then what was the thinking leading up to it about how important it was?
The thinking of it was, when we look at what's going on in our community right now, we had a residential facility to assist people with we'll call it a mid-term or mid to long-term support mechanism here in the city. But that residence has been shut down because it needs over $700,000 of repairs.
Yeah.
So that's gone out of our community. Then when we look at the mental health side of it, we've got over 600 people waiting for mental health support. And we heard some statistics this morning in a meeting that the deputy and I were at in relation to the amount of people who are trying to get into some type of housing, and they're saying, well, it's going to be up to 8 years, Paul. 8 years. This is a crisis. We can't allow this to transpire. And being in the policing world, if you told me 10 to 15 years ago that I would be talking about drugs this way, I would have said categorically, you've lost it, Paul, I'm sorry. But the fact that we're losing people is not acceptable. The fact that we don't have enough mental health support mechanisms and addiction counseling, that's a problem. And it's something we need to address real soon, or we're going to have a lot of people in our community die.
Chris, what kind of advice can we give to people? So what's the message that comes out of this that people can take away to help keep themselves and their loved ones safe?
Well, to start with, for those that are users of illegal street drugs, keep a Narcan kit with you, a naloxone kit. They're available at every pharmacy in the city for free. Don't use alone is another key piece of advice, so that there's always somebody around in the event of an emergency. And I think one thing that hasn't gotten enough attention that our community needs to understand, particularly that community, is there is federal legislation right now called the Good Samaritan Drug Overdose Act that prohibits police from charging people in circumstances where they reach out for help as a result of an overdose. So if somebody does overdose, we want that fear, and the intent of that legislation is to get that fear away that they're going to be charged. The person helping is going to get, oh my goodness, the police arrived and there's illegal drugs on the table in front of us, and now I'm going to be putting myself in jeopardy. So neither the person offering aid nor the person consuming the illegal drugs could be charged under those circumstances. And that's important to get out in the community so that they understand somebody's in peril, reach out, dial 911 to get help for them.
There's a new canine unit that was just announced not that long ago that's coming, which means we will have two. How great a news is that?
That is unbelievable news. Our primary canine officer, Jesse McEnroy, and his dog Bax right now have been utilized across the Quinte area. They've been down to help the customs in Gananoque. They've helped Kingston. They've helped our partners in Quinte West as well. And just having an officer basically on call 24/7, 365 days a year is not healthy. It really isn't. And the dedication of Jesse and Bax have been unbelievable, and the work that they have been doing has been extraordinary. A little plug for Jesse, he was just down at some certification in Michigan, and when he was down there, there was 360 dog handlers and dogs, and he was one of 20 that passed the certification process.
Wow.
So really speaks to the amount of training and the quality of dog and the relationship that they have with each other. But it's going to make a huge difference in our community, Paul, because we're going to have the access to two canines much more often, because obviously Jesse can't work 24 hours a day, and it's just unrealistic to have that expectation out there. So we've been very, very fortunate that members in the community, we've had a group of 5 pay for the dog, so the dog's cost is covered. We've had other members of the community who have supported the Belleville Police have put money towards ensuring that we have funds available to purchase the cage for the dog house, because there are obviously very specific requirements for it. And that dog can't live inside the house. It's a working dog, and the interaction is between the handler and the dog, not the handler, the dog, and his family. So it's a completely different set of rules for, it's not a pet, it's a working animal.
How important is that community support? And this also struck me when going this, because of course there are huge costs involved, especially with the training, of course, because that's an extensive process. But it's also not unique. The people don't know that people in the community have stepped up to provide things before, pieces of equipment for traffic units, other pieces of equipment or support for events that were held. Belleville actually has a very strong history of supporting police through funding specific initiatives. So Chris, how great was it to see people step up and do that again here?
It's key. We wouldn't be able to have this. We wouldn't even have Jesse and Max without community support. And as the chief said, the work that they have done is just absolutely incredible. Right from, finding firearms, from finding people that tracking suspects that we're looking for, to helping find missing children and elderly people that are sadly have dementia and have wandered away. That is a tool that is used by our front line, all the time. And to have a second dog for a community our size is pretty well unheard of in the policing community.
So we just have a couple minutes left. Going into the winter months, what are the priorities for the police service, and what are the messages that you really want to get out to the community to make sure everyone has a happy and safe holiday season?
Primary one, don't drink and drive. Clean your windshields. This time of year when we have seasonal festivities, it's incredibly important that we understand that so many people in our community are not going to have the privilege that many of us enjoy at Christmas time. Yeah. And Belleville is a very giving and a very caring community. But from a policing standpoint, ensure that you're kind to people in the community. Ensure that you're looking to do some random act of kindness for somebody over the holiday season. And we want to ensure people, again, don't drink and drive, please, because we know what kills lives, and it just affects so many people in the community.
Chris, there's also the aspect of Christmas vandalism, because of course a lot of people are going around, they're doing extra shopping, they're getting to their vehicles. Is that also something that you'd like to have a heightened awareness of, safety in parking lots, making sure that you keep an eye on your purse, your wallet, your package while you're going out and doing all those things? How much can people help to ensure their own safety and to make sure they get home with everything they have?
There's lots of things that they can do to ensure their own safety, and you touched on some of them, Paul, but things like parking in well-lit areas, don't leave valuables out in plain view. We utilize our auxiliary program usually at this time of year, and I'm sure we will be again to do a lock it or lose it campaign, where we go around and remind people the importance of actually locking the doors of their cars. Mm-hmm. There's the being aware of your surroundings. We've experienced a fair number of distraction thefts now. We're not unique. That's across the whole country, but being aware when you're in stores of who's around you and keeping your valuables close to you. All those things can really make yourself less of a target for somebody that looks to take advantage.
And last word, Mike, what about time? One of the things that I find, Christmas season especially, holiday season, everyone's always strapped for time. How much can you emphasize that if you just slow down and give yourself an extra minute to breathe and pause, that it can make all the difference?
It will, and it gets back to what we talked about earlier, Paul, about the roadway safety. Everybody is, and I heard this term once, and I love it. It's that children aren't careless; they're carefree. Mm-hmm. So, especially at the Christmas time, they're thinking about Santa, and they're thinking about all the gifts that Santa's going to bring and all the goodies, and they may dart out in front of you. And if you're preoccupied behind the wheel, it's a recipe for disaster.
Okay. Well, I hope you have a happy and safe holiday season. This has been a special edition of Beyond the Politics with the top people at the Belleville Police Service.